Yeah, just coming in and knowing that he had a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and knowing teenagers in general, they can have very strong opinions, especially about someone new invading their territory. And I wanted to be respectful of that.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. If you want to help this show reach cops and other first responders around the world, please consider buying me a $5 virtual coffee at buymeacoffee.com/HeyChaplain. This show is free for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. This podcast exists so that cops can hear encouragement from other cops. There is so much experience and wisdom that does not naturally filter its way down to every patrolman, and I want to fix that. On this podcast, you'll hear from detectives and dispatchers, U.S. Marshals and county sheriffs, and the occasional detective from my hometown of Kansas City. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain give you their hard-earned wisdom so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of the best step-parents I know are police officers. So when it came time to find the 2024 LEO Mom of the Year, I was really happy to receive the nomination of a highly regarded detective who also happens to be a stepmom. So today we're talking to Detective Emily Hren. She works at one of the larger agencies just a little ways down the road from me. She and her husband traveled to visit me recently so that Emily could talk about her experiences as a woman in law enforcement, becoming a cop as a second career, managing the pressures of a blended family, and how to have resiliency as a police detective. Here's Emily Hren. Hello, Emily. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to get you. You came highly recommended. I'm glad you came in today, and I'm eager to talk to you. And so tell me about why you became a police officer.
I'm actually the first person in my family to be a law enforcement officer. My dad's actually a minister. My mom's a private school teacher, and my brother's in healthcare, and my sister's a teacher. So when I first graduated, I actually became a teacher as well. I was a teacher for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And then I got into law enforcement because I knew it's always kind of drawn me towards there. And once I started, I never looked back. I loved it ever since.
Now, I've got to ask, so I'm doing the math, you would have maybe been in your 30s, right, when you decided to go into law enforcement. What was that like?
It was interesting. I'm from North Carolina, so I did a law enforcement training there.
Okay.
Came to Kansas, did another academy there. And then where I'm currently at, I had to do another academy. So being old and doing a lot of PT was not very nice.
What was it? Did you have kind of a den mother experience?
I did.
You're probably a decade older than a lot of the other people in your academy, I imagine.
Yes. My last academy, they all called me mom. So plus I was the president, so that kind of fit. But
Yeah. So you're a leader, but also kind of a manager of some of those fellow recruits, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people ask me, they're like, wow, a teacher to a cop. But it's the same thing, just older children is the way I see it. So
That's awesome. So how did your family respond?
My mother wasn't too sold on the idea to say. My dad loved it. He thought it was awesome. My brother and sister are all okay with it, but they're great with it now.
Okay. Yeah. What were her concerns? Just the danger aspect?
Yeah, that was the whole thing. It's just me being out around people that could hurt me or harm me at any time.
Sure. And like most officers, you almost immediately go out onto the street and patrol. I assume that was your case also.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. How long were you in patrol?
Almost 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel you did with that? I mean, there's all these worries that, a female officer, if she gets into a physical confrontation, maybe, she wouldn't be safe.
Right.
What's your response to that?
I never really thought about it. I just went out and did my job. I know that I had great training. I always put myself through as much training as I could, surrounded myself with other good officers. And like I said, I never really thought about it. I just knew I did what had to be done and always maintained my physical, not just appearance, but, making sure I was healthy, making sure I was strong. And going into that helps build your confidence as well.
Did your mother come around?
She did.
Okay.
She did. I think she knew.
How do you know what changed or what indicated that maybe she became more comfortable with you being a police officer?
I think just knowing that I could hold my own, and her knowing I'm hard-headed, so I was going to do it no matter what. So
Right.
I think she kind of gave into it, but
Sure.
she knew she raised me right and that I was smart and could handle myself. So I think that helped.
Okay. You said you were from North Carolina. Are all your family back there too, or are some of them here?
Nope, I'm the only one here.
Oh, okay. All right. And so you were not only out on a dangerous street, but you were doing that 2 time zones away. And so imagine that was difficult for them at first.
Yeah, very much so. I think it still is, but we're real close, so FaceTime and everything like that helps quite a bit.
Well, good deal. So why did you come to Kansas, if I could ask?
My ex was in the military, and
Okay.
so I got stationed at Junction City, worked there for a little while,
Okay.
and then moved on and just stayed in Kansas. That's
All right.
where I belong, I guess.
That's good.
It's definitely a different role. I know some people look at it as, what do guys do better than girls or girls do better than guys? And I don't really look at it that way. I think it's a good mix. On different calls, you have different types of personalities. Sometimes where a male officer might be seen as intimidating, a female officer can come in and talk to someone and maybe keep it from getting so physical.
Okay.
And then at other times, the male officer actually is a better person for that person to talk to. So I think it's great to be able to have those choices and to be able to have those different personalities there on the scene.
Have a variety of tools.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, women and men think completely different. So, it's a good way to have different angles of looking at different situations that you have as well. I remember one call where there were 3 officers already on scene. The guy was cussing them up and down. He was just mad at everybody. And I showed up as another back. And when I walked in, he immediately was like, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry for my language. I apologize." And just completely changed. And the guys I was working with were like, "What the heck?" Like,
Emily, that's a rare thing that I'm talking to a cop and they tell me a story I have never heard before. That's a first.
Yeah, but it was 3 male officers that were there, and he said that his mother raised him to be respectful to women, and so when he saw me, he had to go into that mode, even though he was not happy cops were there, and yeah, it was funny. There was one where I was actually riding 2-man with another guy at our department, and I'm the tallest female at our department. He's the largest guy at our department as well, so it was interesting to see us riding together. And there was a situation where I thought my partner had told where we were. We were looking for a person that needed to be arrested, and we found him. And he ran back inside, and these 2 were going at it, and they were wrestling and hitting refrigerators and moving them across and everything else. And this female came in, and there were knives laying there. And I was out of their way because I knew if both of them landed on me, I wasn't getting up again, because that's like 800 pounds wrestling right there. And I just looked over and I was like, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay back. Please don't touch those knives or I'll have to use force against you." And she just said, "Okay." And we sat there and watched them wrestle, and finally we took them into custody and it was good to go. But he was a little upset, my husband was, because no one knew where we were. They just heard mics clicking and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah. Call out your location.
Yeah, we were about a block away. They found us. It was okay. I think I know I've had several good female friends, that were concerned that when they became pregnant, that it was just going to mess everything up, whether it be, obviously the physical reactions of having to recover from having a baby. And then also, are the people going to look at them different because the people they were on the street with, they continue doing their job every day.
Yeah.
And then here you're out 9, 12, however many months, over a year.
Light duty, and
Correct.
then completely out of pocket during maternity leave.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then when they come back, it's almost like they've been removed that entire time and having to transition back into where everyone else has moved on.
Yeah.
And so that was a big struggle for a lot of my friends that have dealt with that. And, what I have to remind them is that, this job is not who you are. You still have your family. And if you leave tomorrow, they're going to replace you.
Yeah.
Whereas your family, they're not. That's irreplaceable. And so just to remind them, because you do have that mindset of wanting to grow your career and wanting to be the best officer that you can be, but you have to make sure that that doesn't overtake you being a mother of your family.
Yeah, I have similar advice that I give because even if you're going to have a really long law enforcement career, 25, 30, 35 years, all right, you're going to have your family longer. Mm-hmm. And so you can't sacrifice everything on the family level for the career. The career is important. The career is a calling, but you can't sacrifice everything there. And if it means a year of light duty and maternity leave or whatever, that might still be worth the cost. And
absolutely.
That's what I try to convey. And everyone's got to make their own decision, but that's a difficult thing. So there's a lot of stress. And I think the pressure on a lot of women is to delay family and delay, having babies and get married and just delay all of that as long as possible. And I don't know that that's always the right decision.
It's very difficult. And like I said, it's a case by case, each person's different. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a lot to juggle because, like I said, even though you have a male and a female role as a family, a mom and a dad, physically the demands of the female are higher when that child is so young because of that. And so that's a lot because you have to put so much into this career. You can't just, halfway do it. You have to go all the way because your life depends on it every single day.
Yeah.
And so trying to balance that, it's a lot.
Now, talk to me about finding love in law enforcement. There's been a lot of horror stories, but there's also been some great love stories in that. And I've heard both ends of the spectrum. So talk to me a little bit about your experience.
When I first came to where I currently work, I had always had a rule that I will not date a cop. Just because.
Good rule.
I work with them.
Emily's husband is here in the office with us.
When you go in and work with them, it's different because if it doesn't work out, then you have that awkward, you still have to show up on calls with this person. You can't just say, oh, I'm not going to go to that one. Yeah. So I always stayed away from that, never wanted to do that. And then, of course, someone just kind of kept at it and gave me his number and kept talking to me. And it just, we fell in love and that's basically it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, it gets complicated, though, because you didn't come in as a 21-year-old officer.
No.
You're dating a little bit further down the line. And in this case, the person you fell in love with had children.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So talk to me about coming into a blended family and being a stepmom.
It was interesting because, usually females my age already have children, and I didn't. It just worked out to where I hadn't had any kids of my own. And, I'd always had that motherly role, being a teacher and being an aunt and things like that.
Being a mom to your fellow officers.
Yes, and
sometimes.
those, yes. Yeah. I had millions of children in that. Just coming in and knowing that he had a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old and knowing teenagers in general, they can have very strong opinions, especially about someone new invading their territory. And I wanted to be respectful of that. And it actually worked out awesome. The kids just accepted me, and they, even to the point when we did get married, they said they didn't like the stepmom name because of the stigma. So they always called me Mama M.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they always tell everyone, this is my mama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate in that aspect that we've all just gotten along so great. And it's actually funny too, because their mother works with us. She's in law enforcement.
Oh, wow.
And their stepfather is in law enforcement with a different agency. So those kids had no chance getting away with anything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But we all get along great and it really works out well.
What can a stepmom do to try to build rapport with the stepkids? Do you have any advice? Because sometimes that is the problem. Right. That is how do I ingratiate myself? How do I get in without just pandering to them? That's really challenging.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest things is just don't force it. You have to understand with this, with this profession, there is a lot of change constantly. Whether it be shifts or hours that your parent is at home and things like that. And these kids are already going through a lot of stuff. And so to bring someone new on top of it, you have to be able to relay it in a way that it's an opportunity instead of just another change. Yeah. And so, I think mainly just being there for them, showing that you're not trying to take anything away from them. You're trying to add to their life. Like I said, it takes time sometimes, and every kid's going to be different. and just not take it personally when those kids react to certain things, because it may have nothing to do with you. It just has to do with everything in general.
Sure. So you have a couple teenagers, but if I'm doing the math right, you were still in patrol. So what kind of shifts were you working? Were you working days? Were you working midnights?
I started off on second shift, and then I went to third shift, and then he and I both were on third shift for a while.
And in your agency, second shift is day shift?
It's like middle of the day, into the night. So we have first shift, second shift, and third shift.
Okay.
And so when we both got on third shift, of course, not being home, with our children, that was challenging. So just figuring out a time that we could go check on the kids and make sure, that we had our schedules just right. Maybe a whole lot of security cameras and stuff like that, because it kind of switched as they got older to, instead of worried about people breaking in, them, of course, breaking out in the middle of the night.
Maybe this is a conversation about like detention and corrections. I'm not sure.
Yeah. With anyone that has teenagers knows how that is.
Yes. Yeah. I've got 5. I understand. Yes, absolutely. And so you're juggling shift work with the family, blended family, and the other parents are involved, right? And so how do you manage, like, teenagers can be really busy. So how do you manage time in a new marriage, which is important, but also giving time to those kids' as activities?
It's definitely a lot. You have to manage your time wisely. The days of just going home and vegging out in front of the TV are kind of gone at that point. You have to be purposeful. It's not something that's just going to happen. You have to make it happen. So I know there were many times where he and I would do naps in the car in between softball games, making sure that we were there so that while our child was playing, they saw us. Our face was there. They knew that we were there supporting them. And then when in between games, we're going sleeping where we can.
Wow.
So I definitely will say it's not always easy, but we made it a point that our children knew that they were our priority. I think the biggest thing for me was understanding how stress works on our body and understanding that time, and there are certain things in between, can help those stress levels. But unfortunately, in our profession, we don't really have a lot of time, especially when you're a newer officer. And so learning other things that help out with that, whether it be listening to music, working out, dancing, even simple things like that, those are things that help bring those stress levels down and helps get you back to that homeostasis level, so to speak.
So other than taking naps in the car between softball games, what were you doing to keep yourself healthy and to promote, healthiness in your family?
Like I said, you have to be purposeful with these things. They don't just happen. So things that I made sure of, one, it seems like a very minor thing. And of course, cops hear it all the time. Work out, be healthy, eat right. But it's not just about the physical part of it. Working out just helps in so many ways as far as with your mental state, with your health in and of itself. It's just a huge stress relief. And then working third shift, eating healthy is difficult because we call it the roller food, because you go into the gas stations and anything that's on the rollers, that's what you have to eat. And especially after COVID, a lot more 24-hour restaurants shut down. So having to meal prep, that takes a lot of time. And so, but it's purposeful. But I know that in the end, when I do finally reach that retirement age, I want to enjoy it, not just for myself, but for my husband, for my kids, for my grandkids, hopefully at that time. And so it's something that you have to be purposeful. You have to make time for that.
What would you do for exercise? What kind of meals would you pack up for yourself?
I use an actual app because, like I said, I don't like to use my brain any more than I have to because I feel like it's constantly used at work. So different apps that you can find will help you plan your workouts. They'll help track everything that you have. And I despise cardio. That's one thing I don't know. I've never cared for it unless I'm playing sports. So I tend to lean more towards bodybuilding, working out, things like that. But it still incorporates cardio in with it. So the app helps me so that I don't have to sit there and plan one more thing out. So I feel like that's important too. If you can make those shortcuts like that, I think it helps tremendously. And then with meal prepping, like I said, it's just whether I just make one really big meal and have enough leftovers, that's the easy way to do it. Or if I purposely just, do a bunch of chicken and rice or something like that for an entire week, whatever it may be.
What's the difference in the stress that a patrol officer experiences versus the stress that a detective experiences? Because you were promoted to detective, so what's the similarities and contrast there between patrol and investigations?
That's a great question that I don't think too many people think of, and I didn't really think of it until I became a detective. As in field operations, you're going just from one major call to the next, and you have to be able to change, whether it be going to someone that just had a minor little car wreck and still having the empathy for that person because you know you've got a million reports waiting, that's a big deal to that person, even though it's just almost an annoyance for you because you know it's just another report you've got to do.
Paperwork.
And then going to a shots fired call where your stress levels go through the roof and your adrenaline's going. You get there, you deal with that situation. And then the next situation, maybe you have to talk to a teenager that's, not wanting to listen to mom and dad or whoever it is. So you just have to be able to just switch time after time. And it's instantaneous. You're just going from call to call to call. Mm-hmm. And so just that draining in and of itself can be a lot. But then when you move into detectives, even though we still... I work third shift detective, so I get everything in progress. And so we can still go to calls right away when they're still pretty active if we want to. But then it's a whole different ballgame because now you have to have the resiliency to sit there and be in an interview with some of these people for hours on end. And a lot of these are not easy to talk to, whether it's just their mental state or, whatever it may be. You have to be able to be relatable to that person. So you almost have to be a chameleon and change so that person will want to speak to you.
Yeah.
But then you get into some of the really bad cases and you're looking at these pictures day in and day out. You're listening to what these victims went through. And so it's a completely different level of stress because you don't just get to take the call and move on. You are in this case from start to finish, however long that may take. There was an investigation where a runaway report came out, and everybody was kind of annoyed because, we tend to think of runaways as the same kid doing the same thing. In this situation, it ended up being very different, and I went and spoke with the people involved, and I don't know, just something seemed off. And when I spoke with this child, being a parent, being a teacher, just knowing how that interaction is with kids, I knew something wasn't the way it should be.
So you located the kid or you?
We did. We ended up locating her at a different family member's house, brought her back to the station, spoke with her some more, and I could just tell that child was trying not to tell me something. And I think, being the parent of teenagers, you can learn real quick when a kid does not want to tell you something. And just, I know being a mom helped me to see through that. And it ended up being an extremely long investigation, but come to find out that child had been abused. And it had been going on pretty much her entire life. And so being able to take her out of that situation and being able, to figure out everyone that was involved with it, however many times it had been covered up, the multiple times law enforcement had been called out, but because of just all of the surface stuff, it was hard to see underneath. And so I think that's another, thing with patrol is seeing that they went out and did their part, and then I got to my part, and then putting it all together allowed us to take that child out of that situation and seeing her now out of that for several years, and she's happy and communicating and living her best life. And it's just, I think, it's an encouragement to see that you can take everything that's happened in your past and, your current situation as a parent, your current situation in whatever role you are, and using those talents to be able to do something that has a benefit like this.
I would say God used you as the investigator to see into something and to have insight that maybe another investigator or another patrol officer wouldn't have caught on to.
I agree.
In patrol, a lot of times you're the first one in the door and you see the dead body or the abuse or whatever it may be. You're seeing that and you don't have a lot of choice about it, but you do get to step back then because other people are called in, especially in larger agencies. There's going to be detectives, there's going to be CSI, there's going to be other people to come in and they're going to look at it in detail. But a detective has to look at it in detail. And so that is you're spending time with some of the worst human behavior that there can be. What kind of tools should an officer have? What should we be adding to the toolbox?
I think a lot of people think about the reaction to, and I think if a lot of people would plan for, I think it would help a lot. Almost like a resiliency bank, so to speak, that you would take deposits from. So when you do have time off with your family, go out and do something fun that you guys enjoy together. If you're by yourself, then go do something, a hobby that you used to have. Just enjoy the moments that you have of your own, you know what I mean? And just really build into that bank so that when you do have these rough days and that you do have this stress, you're not reacting to, you're just pulling from that bank that you already have. So I think a lot of times people forget that they can do that if they never even knew they could do that. And then, you know, it's okay. I think more agencies today are understanding the stress, that the mental stress that officers are under, and they're giving them mental health days and things like that. And being able to say, you know, hey, I dealt with a really crappy day yesterday. I need to take a day. And being able to be aware of yourself enough to be able to do that, not to cheat the system. You don't want to cheat the system and say, oh, I just want a day off.
Right.
Because that's going to hurt everyone.
Right.
But to genuinely need a day to yourself to recover, I think is huge for officers. And then with detectives, I think also learning that balance of, you know, not taking these cases home, I think is a little harder because you get so involved with them. And you're involved, you know, if a parent just lost their child and you're trying to give them answers and you're doing everything that you can to give them those answers because you're wanting to empathize with them and everything to be the best detective you can be. And then having to cut that off and go home and not think about that anymore. That makes it very difficult. And one thing I was just thinking about as well with mothers and law enforcement, as a mom, I think you have to have a certain level of empathy to be able to go home to your children, to allow them to come up to you, to embrace them, to be that warm motherly figure that they need from you. And on the street, you have to have a balance of, you know, you have to be a tough officer in order to, you know, you still want to have the empathy towards people, but when there is danger in front of you, you have to step up, you have to take care of that. And so I think sometimes it can be an odd role for a female to be in order to turn that part off and go to work and then turn that part back on and come home. And so I think that's also a balance that I know me and several other of my female friends have a struggle with.
There's a stereotype that some female detectives will gravitate toward sex crimes and crimes against children. Do you think that's advisable? Is that a good thing? What's your take?
I'm not sure. I have heard that before. I will say that I know a lot of times when it comes to rape victims and things like that, other females will tend to want to talk to a female. So I totally understand that. It's not always the case. But I will say in our SVU and sex crimes, however it's a pretty good mix of male and female detectives.
Okay.
Our department is pretty open-minded with everything, and we do a really good job training and stuff like that, to where I think sometimes it is stereotypical, but then when you see it in reality, every department that I go to tends to have a mix of male and female officers. So maybe it's because of that. We tend to think of rape victims and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
The average department is small enough that a detective just takes whatever case
that is true.
is in front of them.
Right.
But if you're in a larger agency and you can specialize, maybe you might have some control over which unit you end up in, what would have been your preference? If you could have just picked any unit to be in, what kind of crimes do you think you would want to investigate? And what would the impact then be on you as a mom and as a wife and that kind of thing?
I'm actually in a fortunate position. Our department is large enough to where we can choose where we want to be. I actually choose third shift right now just because I love the in progress. I don't like getting assigned cases to do follow-up down the road. I like to take it from the very beginning and make sure it gets worked all the way through. But eventually I do want to go to homicide.
Okay.
I know they've already told me to come over, but it is nice now that, you know, my children are grown. They're both out of the house now. They're adults. I know that going to homicide is going to require a lot of time at different times. because you don't know when a homicide's going to occur. But when it does, I could plan on being at the station for almost a full week, from the very beginning, or maybe it's 3 days in a row, or however long it takes to get that scene going, the investigation going and everything like that. So it's something that I've waited on to get into that. And now he's close, my husband's close to retirement. And so I'm thinking about that. It would be nice being in homicide, not having to worry about someone else's schedule, and just being able to go off my own. So it's nice having the ability to choose where I want to go.
Yeah. Well, last question. So you've taught on resiliency. Okay. You've been a trainer where you've talked on that subject. What is maybe the most important takeaway if somebody is, they normally work midnights and now they're going to sit in one of your classes and they're just barely staying awake? What's the one thing you want them to walk away with?
I know this is supposed to be about resiliency, but the thing I always come back to is just for someone to remember their why. Why did they want to become a cop to begin with? Because I think that is going to be their biggest motivator. There's nothing I can say that's going to motivate them more than the reason that they wanted to. And so that is going to fuel them to be the best version of themselves, whether it be a cop, a parent, whatever it may be.
Emily, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciated it.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here.
I am so thankful to Emily and her husband for taking the time to drive 2 hours round trip to interview in person. It was a pleasure meeting them, and as advertised, Emily had all kinds of wisdom to share. I think it's really important to find these officers who have wisdom about navigating all the potential pitfalls of life and law enforcement. So thank you to all the folks who made nominations for LEO Mom of the Year, especially those of you who nominated Emily Hren. I'll do this next year too, so if you have someone with a lot of wisdom who survives and thrives at the intersection of law enforcement and motherhood, contact me and put me in touch with one of these great people before Mother's Day of 2025. At the time that I'm recording this, Mother's Day of 2024 is just around the corner. I hope that you take special care to reach out to your mom and to let all of the moms in your life know how much they're loved and appreciated. For some of you, surprising your mom by showing up at her church on the morning of Mother's Day could be the best gift you could possibly give. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
So personally, from me being a physician for over 15 years, I've seen it. Their health is there. They get high blood pressure, high cholesterol. They have heart attacks earlier, heart failure earlier. Firsthand, I've seen this. And I love that the studies coming out are really supporting this as well. And so the CDC, the National Institute of Justice, they've made several meta-analyses that have been helpful, I think, showing the importance of sleep and taking care of yourself and how their life expectancy is changed. Is they'll have diseases like let's say 20 years prior to the average American. Because of 9/11 and the effects of what 9/11 did, the studies have become even better. And that's why we see most of the studies coming out in 2011 is because now we have 10 years of data watching what happened post 9/11 with increased cancers, heart attacks, decrease in life expectancy, and really setting forth that we need wellness units to take care of our first responders.
I want to remind you that there are ways to contact me and follow up on some of the stuff we talk about in each episode in the show notes. So go inside your podcast app and find those links in the show notes. That's the most direct way to contact me. I would love to hear from you. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.